Okay, Amy, thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for your time. So we're going to start off with a brief PowerPoint presentation, try to set things up a little bit. Then we'll go into the software. We'll spend some time there. Wanted to focus on a couple of items that I think are, quite important to the overall success of TimberScan for Sage 100 contractors. So let's go ahead and I will start sharing my screen here in just a moment. Okay, let me just double check. Can you see my PowerPoint slide? How about now?
Yes.
All right, very good. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started here. And basically what we're going to be covering today with respect to Titanium for Sage 100 is the whole concept of purchase to pay. And what do we mean by purchase to pay? So basically what we're addressing are a number of issues that take place within the accounts payable process at your organization. So what I did is we tried to lay out kind of a concept. And typically when companies come to us and they ask for, they want to take a look at Titanium to see how it can address their issues. Usually this is the place that we start. And what this is a workflow that depicts basically everything that would be associated with that accounts payable workflow process. It starts at the point where an invoice arrives at your door and how you go about getting that invoice into a scenario where you can start to do a number of things. First of all, possibly comparing that particular invoice to the purchase order and receiver that are associated with it. There's data entry involved, so there's keying that invoice into, in this case, Sage 100. There's the approval process, how that invoice gets approved, maybe how it gets coded and approved, and then updating the financials from within Sage 100. Then once the financials have been updated, we have to go through this process of cutting checks or issuing payments. And then there's another approval process that typically takes place with that payment application. And then those payments have to be mailed out, whether they're put in envelopes and mailed to, to your vendors and what have you. But that's kind of the typical process. And most of this, without implementing Titanium, is done by hand. So it's all done. There's very little electronic interaction here. It's all basically, we've taken an invoice, we brought it in. Perhaps we had to put it in a folder so someone could review it. They could code it. Maybe they hand code the information. They send it into accounting. Accounting has to key it in. And all of these steps are all done manually. The next slide, what you're seeing is how we basically eliminate most of those manual steps with an automated tool. So when we talk about bringing an invoice in to your organization initially, what we're talking about with Titanium is the ability to do things like auto-acquire the invoice to bring it in. So now it's in the application, it can be compared against that purchase order and receiver automatically. The data entry process, matching against that purchase order and receiver, can be eliminated in many cases by, first of all, doing a 2- and 3-way match against the PO and receiver, but also by using tools like optical character recognition to extract information from the invoice and populate the invoice entry grid. The approvals are still going to have to be done one way or another, but the nice part is that they can be done on any device. Sending that data and updating your financials in this case, Sage 100 Contractor, can be automated. The approval process of the payments and then actually automating that payment process so you're not having to cut checks are all things that can be done from within the application. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to touch on several of these concepts without necessarily going through and doing kind of an end-to-end demonstration. We're going to talk about the various things that you can do and how you can become a lot more efficient and take advantage of many of the tools that are associated with the application. So there's basically, obviously there are many more, but 3 benefits of purchase to pay that I wanted to highlight. The first is gaining visibility and control with your purchase to pay process. So what do we mean by that? So integrating with your accounting ERP, indexing, searching, categorizing, routing and retrieving documents can be done electronically. And then analyzing the data using things like dashboards and flexible reporting and inquiries. So we're going to touch on that first. Then what we're going to do is talk about efficiency. How can we become more efficient and be able to automate a lot of these manual tasks? Well, one thing you can do is you can set up what are called custom routing workflows. So you don't have to worry about figuring out where does this invoice need to go, whose folder do I need to put it in. The custom routing rules will allow you to be able to do that automatically. Being able to drag and drop, upload documents without having to put them in folders, handle everything manually. The system can allow you to do all of that electronically. And then skipping that manual entry with optical character recognition and some other tools. And then finally, keeping projects on track, paying your vendors 100% on time and securely. So again, what the purchase to pay concept allows you to do is not only manage the invoice on the front end, meaning when the invoice comes in, you're going through that routing and approval process and coding of the invoice, but it's also the concept of being able to manage the invoice, what I refer to as kind of on the back end, where it's time to pay that particular vendor, and how you go about executing that payment process and doing it all electronically. Obviously, the benefits of being able to do automated payments are that you can track everything, you can audit, you can mitigate fraud risk. So all of those things, and you don't have to worry about this very manual, laborious step of taking invoices, putting them in envelopes, and then mailing them to someone manually. So with that as a backdrop, gaining visibility, increasing efficiency, and being able to automate your payments, I'm going to go into the application now. I'm going to walk through some of these steps. Perfect. All right. Very good. Thank you. Okay. So again, we started with that concept of being able to gain visibility. So right out of the chute, let's just talk for a moment about Titanium, the application itself. So I've logged in already, as you can see. And when I log in, basically all of my menu items, everything that I'm going to do within the system is here on the side panel. It's a browser-based application, very easy to navigate. But what you'll also notice is that immediately as I log in, I have access to a dashboard. In this case, because I've logged in as an administrator, I can see everything associated with, in essence, every invoice that's within the organization. Everything that's outstanding. We have 107 outstanding invoices right now. And 199, almost $200,000 worth of payables that are sitting out there. And you can see, obviously, I need to get moving here because I've got a lot that's overdue. But as I kind of work my way down the dashboard, I can also see things by vendor, by job, by cost code, by who it happens to be assigned to. And then there are other widgets that I can start to look into. So from that visibility lens, what I'm able to do immediately, without having to go out and start searching around, running a report, is I can see everything right here on the dashboard. And you notice how as I start to hover the mouse around the dashboard, or around the pie chart, how it will bring up, for example, in this case, who the vendor is and what the total dollar amount is. And you can do the same thing by job and so on and so forth. Now, what's nice about the dashboard is that, again, from an administrative perspective, I can also start to drill in. So if I wanted to go down and look at a particular person and see how many outstanding invoices they have, sorry about that, got logged out. You know, if I have authorization, I can go in and I can see how many outstanding invoices that particular person has. So now I see they have 5 invoices, and again, I can isolate by vendor, by jobs that they're working on, and I can see all this information here. So the nice part is that we're getting that snapshot as soon as we, basically when we're in the system at any given time. And we can see this at the highest level, and we can start to drill into individual users. Now, if I were let's just say I'm an approver, and I'm not supposed to access other people's invoices or see any of their information, what jobs they're working on. In this view, you notice how I can't see that. So I'm logged in as myself. I don't have access to be able to see anybody. It says all users, but that's because it's restricting to just allowing me to be able to see my own invoices and no one else. So you do have that security aspect as well. Now, in addition to being able to see all of this, what I can also do is I can see what invoices do we have in our basically outstanding in AP invoice entry. So I've just called this up in this view where it almost looks like playing cards, and then I could start to open up these invoices if I wanted to. So another area where I'm able to gain visibility and quickly be able to isolate information if I need to. A third thing I can do, I can run reports. So we have a series of reports. I may be restricted depending on the user access here, but I could go out and I could see invoices by job, or I could see invoices by who the user is, and you notice how it's restricting me and only letting me see invoices that are outstanding for me. Again, if I were an administrator, I'd be able to see everybody and see what's outstanding. And then finally, we have a whole series of inquiries. I can come out here, I could run an invoice status, and if you notice that not only does it display the inquiries in this grid, which are very flexible, I can move things around, I can start to shift, I could group these items, I could sort by different columns, so a number of different things that I can do, but you also have a whole series of options here on the left-hand side that allow me to be able to select and choose. So if I said, let me just grab all the information for a particular vendor, whoever that vendor might be, and it's what it's doing here is I'm going out, I'm searching the vendor file from Sage 100. So if I said, give me everything for Ramirez Materials for a particular job, maybe everything for Wood Elementary School, very quickly what I can do is I can select that information, and once I've selected it, and I execute this particular inquiry, then what I can do is I can either download the information to an Excel spreadsheet if I needed to, or I could actually create a PDF. And if I created PDFs from this, I could actually do a report, or I can combine the report with the images. So what that does is that allows me to very quickly and very easily create a substantiated billings report. I can compile all the AP invoice backup for example, a time and material or cost plus project, or maybe for a loan draw, or maybe it's a job audit. So now I'm not going into the filing cabinets to have to pull all this information out that could take me hours. Instead, within a matter of seconds, I'm literally pulling this information together, formatting my report the way that I need to, and then I have all of my information. So what you see here, let's go out here and I'll show you a sample of a report here that I compiled where it shows me here here's my job, my cost code. And as I start to scroll down through behind it, what I did was I compiled all the invoice images associated with this. So again, literally in a matter of seconds, I was able to gather this information, pull it together, and be able to present it to whomever I need to. So that's step one in the process. We're going to continue to focus on gaining visibility as we go a little bit further. But what I want to do now is I want to talk about gaining efficiency. So how do we go about trying to accomplish gaining efficiency? Well, one thing we want to be able to do, let's talk about that invoice when it arrives at your door. So when it first comes in, what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to get that invoice into the application. We don't want to have to take it manually, grab the invoice and put it in a folder or something like that. We want it in the system so that it's active, so that it's visible, so that we can then start to take action on it. So within the data entry queue, we have an acquire step. What acquire allows me to do is to acquire the invoices as they come in and assign them to where they need to go in AP invoice entry. And there are a number of options that you can choose here. I'm only going to highlight a couple for right now. But basically, if I had something that was, for example, on my desktop, maybe it was in a folder, maybe it was something that it got emailed where I just want to go ahead and take the attachment, I can just go ahead and drag and drop, and I'm able to take that particular invoice or series of invoices and pull them in all together. I have a series of annotation controls here, make it larger or smaller if I need to. And then, of course, if there were, maybe two invoices and it was in one PDF, you can always separate and split documents. That's one option. Now, another option is that Titanium does have an email monitoring tool associated with it. And how it works is it will monitor a designated AP email address. More and more vendors and subs are emailing invoices in. So the system can monitor that email address. And as it does, it will take the attachment from the email so that what I'm able to do is I can simply go out and I can acquire. And when I acquire, I can just pull it right from an email file. So I don't have to go out and pull each individual invoice. The system went ahead, it compiled all those invoices that were in that particular email or in various emails that came in, and they're now sitting in front of me waiting for me to acquire them. Now there's also an auto acquire step that can basically bypass all of this AP entry functionality or acquire functionality and send the invoice from the time that it arrives at your door directly into AP invoice entry. So talk about efficiency. No one has to go out and monitor an email address. No one has to take an invoice, put it on a scanner and scan it. No one has to actually physically come into the system and acquire it. The system can auto acquire and it will drop it into AP invoice entry for you. Now, let's talk about AP invoice entry. We've gone to that point where we've gotten invoices in. Now what we want to do, again, we're talking about gaining efficiency here. We want to be able to take the invoice and manage it properly. So the invoice comes in, and several things that we'll talk about here in AP invoice entry. First, notice how the invoice is highlighted in different colors with certain information. What we've done is we've built an optical character recognition tool that allows you to be able to, what we call smart extract, certain data off of the invoice image. So if you notice here, invoice number, invoice date, dollar amount, those particular fields, invoice number you see populated here, invoice date, the due date, the dollar amount, those have all been pre-populated. Where they came from was, again, from that smart extraction optical character recognition. Now, what you'll also notice is that with several of these fields, the vendor number, the job number, the description, there are these little plus signs. What the plus sign is for you to be able to add fields, in essence, on the fly as you're processing an invoice for a particular vendor. And what I mean by that is this. Again, think about this from that optical character recognition perspective where it's able to populate invoice entry fields with key information. But let's just say that I acquired this asphalt and paving invoice and the system wasn't able to recognize, for example, the vendor number or the job number because I don't see any job number on this invoice. I don't see where asphalt and paving put their vendor number on here. But what you can do is once I go out after I've acquired their very first invoice and I search and I go find their vendor code, I populate it, I hit this plus sign, and it basically says, okay, from this point on, every time you receive an invoice from asphalt and paving, we know that we're going to assign vendor number 112. That's my asphalt and paving vendor number. And because I know that we're going to be working on job 186 for the foreseeable future, whenever we receive invoices from asphalt and paving, I can also hit the plus sign on that. So now, from the next time I receive an invoice from asphalt and paving, not only is it going to populate these smart extraction fields, it's also going to populate the vendor number and the job number. So you get the idea. If there were a purchase order on this particular invoice, the system through smart extraction can reference the PO, and it pulls up the PO line item. So you see how in this case, because I referenced PO number 3727, it went out and it grabbed the line items of that. There may be, see how it job costed it, charged it to the right job, to the right phase, to the right cost code. It got that information by doing that two-way match with the purchase order. Had there been a receiver, then it would have become a three-way match where it was able to look at the receiver, compare it against the purchase order, and then attach that data here and pull it into the system. Whenever you reference a PO, the system can also automatically attach that physical purchase order to the invoice. So you can see how quickly and how efficient you can be with regard to processing an invoice. I didn't have to go in here and start from scratch, put my head down, and key all this information in. The system was able to grab a lot of this, and I'm more in the mode of being able to just view and make sure that everything looks okay before I say that I want to go ahead and save and route this invoice. Now, we were talking about visibility earlier. So again, another area where you can gain visibility. I'm processing this invoice. When I click on this little inquiry button here, this tooltip, notice how it brings up and shows me committed amount, what we've invoiced so far, what's in titanium, what is the balance. If the balance goes negative, it's going to highlight that in red. So I'm getting these tooltips throughout the application to be able to allow me to gain further visibility on things like the contract amount of the job, what we've invoiced to date, what is remaining. All of these things are available. I can go all the way down to, to the cost code level, for example, and I can see, okay, here's a case where, we've invoiced more than what we've budgeted, so we're over budget here, and it will tell you that information. You can also do history on any field. So if I happen to be looking at the job and I click on the history button, I'm able to go out and see all of the history for any invoicing that we may have done for that job. Same thing with vendor. It works on any field, but I'll just give you a couple of examples here. So let's say it's that particular vendor. I want to go out, I want to see all of the invoices that we've done for this particular vendor. I have it. I can pull it up. Not only can I see what invoice we've already processed, but if I click the plus line, I'm actually seeing the line items and how we coded this as well. So you not only can drill down on the screen and see those tooltips, but you're then able to kind of drill into and look at what invoicing you've done to date for this particular vendor, for this particular job, for this particular purchase order. All of those things are available to me by simply going out and choosing and clicking on that history button. So you can see, not only are you, again, gaining that visibility aspect, but you're also able to be very efficient in how you go about processing here. A couple of other tools that we don't have to get into too much detail here, but sometimes people get concerned, well, this invoice is being blocked off here. You can simply just go ahead, disconnect it. You could throw it out to your second screen if you had dual screens. You can always move this screen around. There's options here for you to be able to just move it over to the other side. So it gives you that, again, the ability from, more the visibility and the efficiency standpoint, whatever's the best way for you to be able to go ahead and process and still be able to, see the invoice as you're going about this. You can do those types of things. Let's talk again about efficiency. All right, so I'm at the point where I say, okay, let's just go ahead and save and route the invoice. And the invoice gets routed off to the approvers. Now, how does it get there? It gets there based on the workflow setup that you execute when you implement Titanium. So one of the first things that we do through that implementation process is we go through and start to design with you and help you design your workflows. How the workflows are designed is you can basically take any field in the invoice entry screen and use it to route by. When I say that, let me just pop in here, routing fields. So in this case, I said I want to route by job number. Let's create a new one. So when I create a new one, you notice how it's bringing up literally every field. It looks like almost everything in the dictionary. Basically, what it is it's all the fields that could possibly be selected from AP invoice entry. So you have tremendous flexibility with which you can go about routing. If you need to route to a project manager, the system can actually read the project manager credentials from the job in Sage 100 and apply it to the project manager automatically. Makes it very simple. Again, we're trying to be, we're being efficient here. We're trying to eliminate steps, and this would allow you to be able to do that. You could say, no, you know what, we have multiple approvers. We have invoices that we enter where we don't necessarily know how it's supposed to be coded. Maybe we don't know what phase, what cost code. That's all well and good. The system will still allow you to go about saving and routing, sending it off to the approvers, and then they go through the process of reviewing, coding, and approving. So let's get to that step. Let's get to where the approver would sit, and that's right here in the workflow task queue. So if I have an invoice or invoices that I need to approve, I can call them up, and I can start to call up the information, and I can start to code. Again, I can make this larger or smaller. Another thing that I can do here, let's actually shrink this down for just a moment, because I think it's important to emphasize, again, we're touching on that visibility and efficiency standpoint here, where you can actually work with any device. So if I happen to be on my phone, I could be out in the field somewhere, and as an approver, I'm able to call up the invoice on my phone. I'm able to see how it's been coded so far. If I needed to make changes, add something, put in the cost code, do whatever I need to do, I can do that right here on my phone, as opposed to having to wait till I get back into the office and log in and code the invoice in the office. So that's the whole concept behind this, is that it can be fit to any device. And as it is, and it's associated with that device, then I can call it up. I could be home, sitting on my, on an iPad. I could be out in the field somewhere. I could call it up on my phone, or I could be in the office and I just use my web browser. You can obviously approve an invoice. You can reject. You can put an invoice on hold. As you do any of those things, on hold or reject, obviously you do have to put a reason in as to why you did it, but it gives you the ability to be able to do that very quickly, very easily. And then again, from a visibility standpoint, if anyone else needed to be able to go in and see, why did Mike put this site work and paving invoice on hold, they'd be able to see it. There would be a reason in there explaining why I did that. Okay. Another aspect of the application, and again, talking about from that visibility lens, the system allows you to create notifications. So when I was entering an invoice and then I said I want to save and route the invoice, I want to route it off to the approvers, the system can allow you to be able to set up notifications where you can decide when and how often you want to be able to notify someone that they have invoices to review and approve. And this can be done not only for the initial entry and routing of the invoice, but also on other intervals as well. Maybe you want to set up alerts where you say, After an invoice has been sitting with someone for greater than 3 days, or maybe it's within 4 days of the discount date or something like that, set up a notification that will start alerting them that we need to get these invoices approved. So all of that is available. Now, ultimately, what will happen is that these invoices will go through that approval process, and they will update Sage 100 Contractor. Once they do, and you come to here, there's no double entry that's needed. Everything gets pushed from Titanium over to Sage 100. And in here, if I were to go to an invoice, what I'm able to do is I can see, here's all my data. It shows me this is what was updated. This came from Titanium. Shows me my job cost information, how it's been coded. And it also attaches any of the invoice images and any supporting documents. So if I wanted to, from Sage 100 Contractor, I can call up that invoice and I have any of the supporting documents associated behind it, all the way down to that payment document. All of that is available to me. So again, visibility, efficiency. I didn't have to do anything as far as double entry, keying this information into Titanium, and then having to come over here and key it in again. The system just automatically updates it for you when the approval process is done. It gets here, it's visible to me here, along with the invoice image and any of the supporting documents. Okay, let's go through the final step in the process, which is the managing those payments. So we've talked about different ways in which you can gain visibility, ways that you can become more efficient. Now let's talk about maybe combining both of those with being able to manage that payment, the step of being able to pay your vendors. So what you would do is you're still going to come into Sage 100 Contractor. You're going to start there. You're going to say you want to pay your vendors. But in what we've done is we've built a tool that once you go ahead and you say you want to go about executing payment, we can capture that information and we can send that data back to Sage 100, from Sage 100 Contractor into Titanium. So you're not having to basically print out those quote unquote checks to your printer and then put them in the mail and mail them out. Instead, what we do is we simulate that process here in Titanium. We have something called the pay control system. What pay control allows me to do is to take the data that I would normally send to a printer and in essence to simulate and send that data over to Titanium. So when I'm in Titanium and I go to my pay control, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to browse here. All right, let me just forward here. Let me go forward just a little bit, a couple of images here. Here we go. Okay. See if there's another one. Skip back. Okay. So basically what we've done is we've created a scenario where we've replicated what you would normally send to your printer, but instead we've captured that information into Titanium. This is basically a sample check image. Here's the check number that was assigned from Sage 100 when we were in Sage 100 and we executed that payment process. The check, the stub, and the invoices that the check is paying. Here in this window, I have the actual invoice image. Now, this is not a very good example, but you get the idea. What it does is it references that invoice, and it goes ahead and attaches that particular invoice, or in this case, this is a payment record. And it attaches that invoice and any of the supporting documents behind it. So think of this as this. The concept of someone goes out, they do a check selection, and they go ahead and they say they want to print checks. They printed the checks, and they took the check, they attached it to the invoice that check was paying, and then they have to hand that off to someone who has to say, okay, I'm good with going ahead and approving this payment. Maybe they sign off, they sign it, whatever. We're basically replicating that here. I'm able to see what looks like the check and the invoices that the check is paying, and then I simply come in here and say, this one looks good, I'm going to go ahead and approve it. Or you know what, no, I'm going to put this one on hold. We're still waiting for something. Maybe there's a lien waiver involved or something. So I'm not going to go ahead and pay this yet. And then you can set up your notifications to be able to alert if you put something on hold. So think of this as that we've done that process of we've printed. Now we've attached it to the invoice. We've handed it off. Now someone has to go through and approve it. Now, if you don't have that particular scenario where someone doesn't necessarily have to go through and approve, you can bypass this step. And if you bypass, whether you bypass or you approve from here, basically what you're doing is you are now taking this payment and you're handing it off to the Avid Pay Network. And then Avid Exchange, acting similar to any other type of financial institution, will go about paying your vendor on your behalf. There are basically three ways in which the vendor can choose to be paid. They can be paid by a virtual card, 16-digit merchant card. They can be paid by ACH, or they can be paid by a check. But the vendor makes the choice. We don't force them into any method whatsoever. They choose how they want to be paid. But we manage that process. We eliminate any risk of fraud. So we've taken that out of your hands. You don't have to worry about managing any ACH information for your vendors and keeping that on your system. We've basically, accomplished all that. And now the payment inquiry, what that does is that allows for you to be able to see what's happened as those payments get sent to the pay network. So if I were in here and I wanted to look at this alpha installation payment, I can see how were they paid by virtual card. I could see what the bank account was that they were drawn from. What's the check number that we issued from Sage? Where is it? Oh, and here's one that's cleared for Nations Bolt Hardware. Here's another one that's still processing. We're still in the process of executing that payment. Then over here you have your action buttons where if I needed to, I could simply say, okay, let me produce a proof of payment document associated with this. It shows me this, and this automatically gets attached to the invoice so that the system now has a complete audit of the invoice, any of the supporting documents, and the proof of payment document. What you can also do is you can click on this plus sign and it will show you everything that took place with that payment record. Once it was sent to the Avid Pay Network, what happened from there? In this case, this was a very easy transaction. It looked like very straightforward. We got it and basically processed and paid it the same day. Paid by virtual card. I think of this as kind of that UPS tracking tool where you can come in here, you can just check the status of any single payment transaction and you can see exactly what's happening at any given time. Okay, so that basically kind of takes us through those three key steps that we were talking about earlier of being able to gain efficiency, to be able to gain visibility, and also to be able to keep everything on track by being able to pay your vendors automatically and not having to do anything manually. So I like to kind of sum this up by just saying that if you're looking for an opportunity to become far more efficient, not have to do things manually by hand, not have to handle a piece of paper, the system that Titanium that I've been showing you gives you the opportunity to eliminate the paper throughout the entire AP workflow process from purchase to pay. And with that, Amy, maybe we can open it up for any questions.
Sure. No one has put any questions in the chat since we started, but if anybody has a question that they would like to ask now, please go ahead. I might even be able to unmute people. Let's see. But I can't unmute. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, they made it easy on me.
Doesn't look like we have any questions today.
Okay. Well, if anything comes up, by all means, feel free to reach out. We're happy to, address them and take a deeper dive into the application.
We do have one question. Where do you assign GL number if you don't use POs?
Oh, good question. All right. So let's do that. Let's go in there. So if I were in AP invoice entry, let's see if I can find one that I didn't put a purchase order in. I did on this one. Okay. Basically, let's say I didn't put in a PO. See how it just brings up the account number, and I can just assign it right from here. So, and I probably should have mentioned this before. All of these fields that you see here in our AP invoice entry grid are the exact same fields that exist in Sage 100 Contractor AP invoice entry. We basically took all of those fields and we just replicated them in a different format to try and make it easier and more efficient to be able to process. But if you look at invoice number, order number, subcontract number, vendor, job, phase, description, and then you come over here, invoice number, order number, subcontract number, vendor, job, phase, type, description, all the same things. So we just kept everything exactly like it was, but we put it in this format because we found that this is easier to work with, and it has obviously all those other tools that we've been, touching on here, and you can, move columns around, you can do all kinds of different things here. But to answer the question, yes, if I didn't have a PO and I wanted to just reference a GL account code, it's here. I can just go ahead and put it in there. As I dig it, I can go into whatever that particular code is to be able to get it right from Sage 100 Contractor.
So they're asking, does Titanium do POs or would you use Sage for that?
We don't. Titanium does not actually execute and create purchase orders. That would have to be done in Sage. Good question.
Any other questions? Again, thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Amy.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mike.
Bye-bye now.
Bye, everybody. Have a great day.